let me set the scene for you. In 2002, Hasbro sued David Chang over his creation, Ghettopoly, claiming it infringed on their copyright. Chang lost based on his countersuit, claiming Hasbro couldn't own the trademark for Monopoly, as it was based on a flawed claim made by its designer Charles Darrow, who in fact didn't design Monopoly, thus making any patent void. Hasbro won because David employed trademarks, artwork, and language from the official Monopoly game that Hasbro owned, and in this situation Hasbro was right. What Hasbro could not do is claim copyright infringement on the rules. Why? Well, for that we need to go back further, all the way to 1879, and a court case with apparently no connection with board games. In Backer versus Selden, a plaintiff developed a new method of bookkeeping and published a book explaining it. When another publisher started selling the book detailing a similar process, the plaintiff's widow filed suit. The Supreme Court determined that although the book was subject to copyright, the method itself was not. This was later codified in the Copyright Act of 1976, stating that in no case does copyright protection for an original work or authorship extend to any idea, procedure, process, system, method or operation, concept, principle, or discovery, regardless of the form in which it is described, explained, illustrated, or embodied in such work. Wow. That was a mouthful. To translate, it meant that you could copyright an idea, an invention, but not a process or a rule, in the same way someone could not copyright a discovery, scientific theory, or mathematical method. As an example, you could copyright a medical device, but you couldn't copyright what it's meant to cure. All right, we got through that paragraph. So what does that mean? It means that artwork can be copyrighted, as can storylines and the design of specific components. The name of the game can also be potentially trademarked, but when someone creates a novel game mechanic, it becomes open season for anyone influenced by those rules. In 2008, Donald X. Vaccarino created the deck-building game Dominion, itself inspired by previous games like Magic the Gathering, where the building of a deck occurred before the game began. Dominion made that aspect the entire game. To be honest, on its own, Dominion is a bit of a slog. There is virtually no player interaction, and the game ends when one of the stacks of purchasable cards is emptied. Players then add up the points within their decks, but what Donald contributed was far more valuable than the game itself. Everyone realized deck building was an excellent idea, one that they all could utilize. The subsequent years produced thematically distinctive, though virtually identical games, leading eventually into innovative variations that took the original concept and evolved them to meet new themes. This works identically across the industry for every set of rules. It could be D&D or it could be Gloomhaven. One example is a game I backed recently called Starlight. Now, although much of Starlight is inventive, its core mechanics are derived from tried and proven ideas that will feel comfortable to experienced players. In September of 2017, Serious Pulp introduced Seventh Continent, a game where players explore an ever-expanding landscape of laying down tiles and completing objectives. This process was pervasive over multiple game sessions, with the next game starting with the previous one left off. This idea would later be applied in Awakened Realms Tainted Grail, and it has found itself again in Starlight. Concurrently in 2017, Cephalofair Games launched what would arguably be the greatest game of all time. Yes, arguably, some people don't agree with this, including me. Gloomhaven presented itself as a hex-based tactical combat game with pervasive campaign elements, but even this was not revolutionary, having been seen for decades, all the way back to 1994 with the release of FASA's Battletech. The legacy elements were borrowed from the first iteration, Risk Legacy, in 2011. Gloomhaven's popularity was due mostly to its immense scope, though it also introduced a few interesting original elements. No dice are being rolled in Gloomhaven. Player characters nearly always hit. Instead, they draw cards from a modifier deck, often only marginally altering results, though occasionally significantly affecting them. Starlight employs the same mechanic as well, but then combines that with die placement, a mechanic first implemented more than 15 years ago, though there is some debate on which game developed first. Roma introduced the idea in 2005, but it was not fully realized in all its greatness until Alien Frontiers 5 years later. The important takeaway from all of this deals with originality. It's not as essential to develop an entirely novel mechanic as it is to integrate a mechanic, new or not, perfectly into a game. Just because you're the first doesn't mean you're the best. As more creators enter the industry, the colossal bouillabaisse of game mechanics and rules grows even bigger, and everyone can have a seat at the table and serve themselves a bowl. This is Chris from Deus Ex Machina.